Hello and welcome. Here's what's happening right now. The Prime Minister outlines his priorities in the first post-election address.
I will fight for the best deal for Canada and only accept the best deal for Canada.
Time set for face-to-face talks with Donald Trump. And Pierre Poilievre's second chance to get back in the House.
My message is a simple one. You are not forgotten.
Plus, honoring Canadian heroes who fought to liberate the Dutch.
CTV National News with Heather Butts.
Prime Minister Mark Carney faced questions from reporters at his first press conference since his election win on Monday. Carney also made a number of announcements and laid out a very busy agenda over the next month. On Tuesday, May 6, Mark Carney will travel to Washington to meet with President Donald Trump. His new cabinet will be sworn in the week after. Parliament will be recalled on May 26, and the day after that, King Charles will be in Ottawa to deliver the speech from the throne. CTV's Abigail Beeman was listening closely to the presser and lays out the details we heard today. Abigail.
Heather, first on that list, a trip to Washington, where the Prime Minister says he expects difficult but constructive and comprehensive discussions. In his first post-election press conference, Prime Minister Mark Carney said Donald Trump respects strength, and his plan is to build Canada strong.
My government will fight to get the best deal for Canada. We will take all the time necessary, but not more, in order to do so.
Carney heads to the White House Tuesday. He says the length of planned meetings and the seniority of the other people scheduled to be there show how seriously the president is taking things. And Carney will be focused on two planks: fighting tariffs and working on the broader relationship. But those watching closely say don't expect things to be resolved in the short term.
The meeting with President Trump is just the first step in a very long game. So the first thing that the Prime Minister has to do is get a good rapport at a personal level with President Trump, because that counts for a lot.
From being hosted at the White House to playing host to the King and Queen.
This is an historic honor which matches the weight of our times.
Carney said King Charles accepted his invitation to open Parliament and deliver the speech from the throne May 27th.
And that is it clearly underscores the sovereignty of our country.
The throne speech sets out the government's priorities for the next Parliament and is usually delivered by the Crown's representative in Canada, the Governor-General. A monarch hasn't read it since 1977.
I don't think anybody should think the King arriving with the Queen in hand is going to solve any tariff problems on their own. It's a small gesture. It may be meaningful and help build a kind of solidarity around Canada's distinctiveness.
The Prime Minister also told us a few more things about the next session of Parliament. He ruled out a governing deal with the NDP and said while he's still working on building his cabinet, it will be efficient, focused, and will respect gender parity. Heather?
Abigail Beeman reporting from Ottawa tonight. Thank you. Also today, we learned what's next for Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre after losing his seat. The party announced which MP-elect will give up their seat so that Poilievre can run in a by-election, something Mark Carney said he'd be ready to call as soon as possible. CTV's Judy Trin is in the nation's capital with more on the leader's future and who's giving up their seat. Judy.
Heather, according to Elections Canada, once a seat is vacant, a by-election has to be called within 180 days. Today, the Conservative Party announced that Pierre Poilievre will run for re-election in Alberta. After Pierre Poilievre failed to win the riding that he held for more than 2 decades, losing to a rookie Liberal candidate by more than 4,000 votes, the Conservatives have cleared a path for him to return in rural Alberta.
Hey everybody, it's Damien Couric.
Damien Couric has represented Battle River-Crowfoot since 2019, but he's quitting so Poilievre can run. In a statement, Couric said an unstoppable movement has grown under his leadership, and we need Pierre fighting in the House of Commons to hold the Liberal minority government to account. This is a safe seat. The Conservatives won the riding southeast of Edmonton with nearly 82% of the vote.
They're going into a riding that won by a huge margin, 82%. to remove virtually any possibility of people organizing to defeat him a second time.
Meanwhile, the Prime Minister has agreed to call a by-election as soon as possible to allow Poilievre to return to debating him in the House of Commons.
I've already indicated to Mr. Poilievre that if it's the decision of him and the Conservative Party to trigger, if I can put it that way, a by-election, I will ensure that it happens as soon as possible.
Okay.
No games, nothing, straight.
On social media, Pierre Poilievre called Damien Carrick's decision to step aside a selfless act, and he said that he will work hard to represent the citizens of Battle River-Crowfoot. However, even with this quick move, it's unlikely we'll see Poilievre in Parliament before the fall session. Heather.
Judy Trin joining us from Ottawa. For more insight, let's bring in our chief political correspondent, Vassy Kapelos. Vassy, let's start with Mark Carney's address. If Canadians didn't know what you were getting, he put forward a very clear agenda and perhaps a sign of him reaching out to those who didn't vote for him.
Yeah, I thought there were two main takeaways, one on substance, one on style. On style, I think he clearly demarcated himself in this press conference, not only actually a little bit from what we were on the receiving end. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Very different styles throughout the press conference than we were used to with Prime Minister Trudeau. I thought on substance there are a number of takeaways, primarily that he's established like a framework, lots of dates for everything that's about to happen. And of course, our reporters laid that out. I think what it will allow us to do as journalists and Canadians is to measure his impact against those dates. So we are able to see whether what he is saying he is going to do to reach out to those voters, for example, or a whole host of other things actually does happen. Even, for example, bringing down the trade barriers by July 1st. We're going to know if it does happen by then.
Okay, and Vassy, turning to the other major political news of the day, Pierre Poilievre will run in an Alberta by-election now. So what do we know about this riding and how this will unfold?
The primary thing to know about the riding, Heather, is that it is safe. It is as safe as it gets for a Conservative. I believe the Liberal candidate doubled their take in this election from the last one and still landed at 11% of the popular vote. So most likely Pierre Poilievre will win that. Whether he wins the greater battle for the position of leader in the party, I think is not 100% certain. He certainly has more support than I remember each of his predecessors, both in caucus and amongst rather the membership. But that doesn't mean it stays that way. And in both those cases, it took a while to bring the leader down. So if it does happen, it might take a while. This time, it's not a certainty that it will, but it's also not certain that he stays in that job, Heather.
All right, our chief political correspondent, Vassy Kapelos in Ottawa. The auto sector has been dealt another blow with GM announcing it's cutting back production at its assembly plant in Oshawa. As a result, hundreds of jobs will be lost, a move that could also affect more than 1,000 additional jobs in the supply chain. CTV's John Venevali-Rao is in Oshawa for us tonight. John, a difficult day for auto workers.
Heather, workers have been bracing for bad news. Still, word of an entire shift being lost is coming as a shock. The crushing news was delivered to GM workers early this morning, with operations here essentially being slashed by a third.
As a union, we're devastated. I mean, these folks build a high-quality truck.
At this plant where they assemble the Chevy Silverado, they've been making them around the clock. But as of this fall, one of 3 shifts will be cut, throwing 700 people out of work. And the union says it'll affect as many as 1,500 jobs in the supply chain.
The reality is that this decision by General Motors is clearly being done to appease Donald Trump, to look out for themselves in this trade war and not their employees.
This all comes a month after Trump slapped a 25% tariff on Canadian-built vehicles, a move directly targeting assembly plants. In a statement, GM cited forecasted demand and the evolving trade environment, but added these changes will help support a sustainable manufacturing footprint as GM reorients the Oshawa plant to build more trucks in Canada for Canadian customers. The truck model built here is also assembled in the U.S. and Mexico. The union blasting GM's move as premature, saying the company should have waited to give Prime Minister Carney a chance to sit down with Trump to negotiate an economic deal.
I'm sad that this happened. I'm sad for the workers. Workers are going to be shocked and reeled right now, and they don't know what to do. And they've got mortgages to pay and bills to pay and kids to feed.
This is just the latest tariff-related blow to the auto sector in Ontario, after Stellantis shut down its Windsor assembly plant for 2 weeks in April. Meanwhile, with the shift loss still months away, the union is hoping there's still time to convince GM to reverse its decision. Heather.
John Benavalli-Rao in Oshawa, Ontario tonight. Tesla is threatening to sue the Canadian government over what it calls a misunderstanding of a federal rebate program for electric vehicles. In March, Transport Canada froze more than $40 million in rebates from the company. CTV's Adrian Gabriel has been following this story and breaks down the legal fight happening right now. Adrian.
Heather, a Freedom of Information request submitted by the Toronto Star has revealed that Tesla has sent a letter to the federal government accusing Ottawa of unlawfully freezing $43 million in electric vehicle rebates.
Tesla's threat to roll out a lawsuit stems from an investigation into whether the U.S.-based company exploited a Canadian taxpayer-funded EV rebate program.
Has there been some form of advanced knowledge? Has Tesla gamed the system? We don't know the answers to that.
In 2019, Ottawa kicked its IZEV program into gear. Dealers were instructed to front the $5,000 rebate on the promise the government would repay each dealership. On Friday, January 10th, car dealerships across the country received this email from Transport Canada saying due to the high uptake, the IZEV program will be paused in a few weeks. Over the next 72 hours, a handful of Tesla locations across Canada reported the sale of 8,600 vehicles, amounting to $43 million in government rebates. That Monday, the government closed the program, leaving other independently owned Canadian dealerships who've spoken to CTV News unable to process nearly $11 million in rebates already paid out to customers across Canada.
In my case, we're talking over $400,000 loss. Huge impact.
The officials of Transport Canada have written 2 letters, which I would characterize politely as cover their behind letters. We have a fiasco at Transport Canada.
Following a CTV News investigation, the Minister of Transport's office promised to repay Canadian-owned dealerships who are out of pocket. In an email to CTV News, Krista Freeland wrote in part that she has instructed Transport Canada to stop all EV rebate payments for Tesla vehicles in order to fully examine each claim individually and determine whether all are eligible and valid.
And it's that move which has sparked Tesla's legal threat. As for those independent dealerships, those we've spoken with say they've yet to receive a penny from Ottawa. Heather.
All right, CTV's Adrian Gabriel in Toronto for us. Thank you. The sexual assault trial involving 5 former World Junior hockey players resumed in London, Ontario, and on the stand today were NHL players, not accused but present on the night in question, as well as, for the first time, the victim herself. CTV's Nick Pepperella is in London and joins us now. Nick, what did jurors hear today?
Well, the jurors heard plenty, mainly from the central witness in this case, Heather. The female complainant in this case got on the stand this afternoon. That's after those 2 hockey players testified. She basically said that in June of 2018, when the Canadian World Junior hockey players were in town to celebrate their gold medal win, she was going out to Jack's Bar, which is not far from the London courthouse here, to party with some co-workers. She said she had consumed a lot of shots, a lot of drinks, about 12 drinks. And then at one point, she meets up with one of the accused in this case, Michael McLeod. They get out on the dance floor with a bunch of the other players who are also partying at the same bar. And she says at one point there was a lot of touching going on and she felt uncomfortable. She was shown a video. The Crown showed her a video of her on the dance floor, and she says she's got her eyes closed and she looks to be very intoxicated. So earlier in the day, as you mentioned, one of the hockey players, an NHLer, Taylor Radish, testified about being at the Delta Armories Hotel, and that's where this alleged incident is alleged to have happened. And so he testified just about seeing a woman in the bedroom, in the room of Michael McLeod, and then basically he and his teammate left the room.
All right, CTV's Nick Pepperella reporting outside the London courthouse this evening. Thank you, Nick. Coming up.
But they would do that for us. People they had never even met.
Why one European country is marking a remarkable Canadian sacrifice. 80 years ago, Canadian soldiers fought to finally free the Netherlands from Nazi occupation. Liberation Day, as it's known in the Netherlands, is this coming Monday, and commemorations are already underway. CTV's Andrew Johnson is there with more on what it means to surviving Canadian soldiers. Andrew.
Heather, it's remarkable, really. 80 years after the end of the Second World War, the Canadian government has brought more than 20 veterans back to the Netherlands. Remarkable because most of them, all of them, are right around 100 years old. But they haven't forgotten the men who fought beside them and didn't make it home.
I wish to speak to all here who died in the cause of Canada and fought for freedom of oppression. My message is a simple one. You are not forgotten. Your death is remembered, and we are still living souls here, grateful to your sacrifice of your life so many years ago.
The ceremony today was at the Groesbeek Canadian War Cemetery, the largest of several in the Netherlands. There are more than 2,300 Canadian soldiers buried there. Close to 8,000 Canadians, including Indigenous soldiers, died liberating the Netherlands in some of the toughest fighting of the war.
But they would do that for us. People they had never even met. So naturally, we, the liberated, want to know about our benefactors, who they were, what they looked like, what lives, what personal history they left in Canada.
The Faces to Graves Foundation in the Netherlands researches and tells the stories of the Canadians who gave their lives to push Germany out of Holland and deliver food to a nation that had been starving for months. Tomorrow there will be a parade here in Apeldoorn where the Canadian veterans will be treated to a hero's welcome. And the 100-year-olds who made this trip know this could be their last chance to say, "You're welcome." Heather?
CTV's Andrew Johnson with a very emotional community in Apeldoorn, Netherlands. A legal defeat for Prince Harry today, who had challenged the level of security he gets while in the UK.
The Duke of Sussex's appeal would be dismissed.
A judge in London rejected his appeal, saying the downgraded police protection was a consequence of him stepping away from royal duties and leaving the country. Harry, who was not present in court today, told the BBC he was devastated by the decision and that security has been a sticking point between him and his father.
I would love reconciliation with my family. There's no point in continuing to fight anymore. As I said, life is precious. I don't know how much longer my father has.
The prince says he won't travel to the UK with his family under the current situation. Preparations are underway at the Vatican for the conclave that will select a new pope. Today, firefighters installed the chimney that will signal a successor to Pope Francis. Workers were seen on the roof of the Sistine Chapel working on the chimney before the voting begins on May 7th. The ballots are burned in a special furnace during the conclave. Black smoke means no decision, but white smoke confirms a new pope is selected. Archaeologists stumbled upon a remarkable discovery in Spain, uncovering a 500-year-old shipwreck. The wreck was unearthed at a historic fish market that was being excavated. The ship likely sank off the Catalonian coast in the 15th or 16th century. It's a particularly significant find because underwater archaeological remains that are well preserved are rare. CTV National News is back in a moment. Two Canadian teams have advanced to the second round of the NHL playoffs, and another could join them tonight.
Finds the loose puck, still with it. Sets up Pacioretty, they score!
The Toronto Maple Leafs eliminated the Ottawa Senators in the only all-Canadian matchup. They'll now take on the defending Stanley Cup champions, the Florida Panthers. And the Edmonton Oilers knocked out the Los Angeles Kings for the fourth year in a row. They'll now go on to play the Vegas Golden Knights. And the Winnipeg Jets hope to eliminate the St. Louis Blues tonight in Game 6 of that series. They will be playing in St. Louis and will be without star Mark Scheifele, who was injured in the last game. NBA coaching legend Greg Popovich of the San Antonio Spurs is hanging up his clipboard. Coach Pop, as he's affectionately known, ends his coaching career as the league's all-time wins leader. The five-time champion suffered a stroke in early November. The 76-year-old will stay in his role as team president. After the break, a walk down memory lane.
So many wonderful lessons in beauty care, you know, skin and hair. None of the hair was gray.
Fashion ambassadors remember the heyday of Hudson's Bay. As Hudson's Bay liquidates all of its stores across Canada, sentimental stories about the iconic company are coming to light, including one about a group of women in Calgary who were some of the first to be on the Hudson's Bay Teen Fashion Council. CTV's Kathy Lee now in Calgary with more on their unique experience with the Bay. Kathy.
Heather, some of these women haven't seen each other in years, but a reunion at the Bay store where they spent a lot of their high school years brought them back to those special moments decades ago. A step through these doors is like a step back in time for these women. A wave of nostalgia washes over them. More than 6 decades ago, they were one of the first to be on the Hudson's Bay Teen Fashion Council in Calgary.
It was a huge deal for us. I think we felt very important somehow.
As the iconic Canadian retailer operating for more than 350 years closes countrywide, this group reunited to bid farewell.
It's just heartbreaking.
And to reminisce about their time as fashion ambassadors all those years ago.
There you are.
Of the 5 high schools in the city at that time, only 2 students from each were chosen for the coveted positions.
We modeled, we had fashion shows and often got the clothes. We got so many wonderful lessons in beauty care, you know, skin and hair. None of the hair was gray at that time.
The stylish high school students, possibly the original influencers, helped showcase the latest fashion trends.
We were sort of like a teen connection. And it promoted young people coming to the Bay.
And as a side gig, they also worked part-time.
I was assigned to the lingerie department one Mother's Day, and I was so exhausted after 8 hours on my feet. I got on the bus, fell fast asleep. We lived in Parkdale, and I ended up in Bowness, and the bus driver had to wake me up.
The stories endless, the friendships formed, and lessons learned, timeless treasures. And although this chapter of the Bay ends, the memories for this group will always remain etched in their hearts. Kathy Lee, CTV News, Calgary.
It's great to hear those memories. That is our newscast for this Friday evening. Thank you for joining us. I will be back right here tonight with CTV National News at 11. I hope you can join us for ongoing coverage. Turn in to CTV News Channel. I'm Heather Butts. Your local CTV News starts right now.